episode, we're going to introduce you to Mark Allen Eisinger. Now, he promised investors a 30% return on their investment backed by gold reserves that he held in his company, the Saxon Group. There were no gold reserves, and his investors lost more than $40 million. But first, we're going to examine another story about a financial predator. Ian Thau posed as a reputable investment advisor and built a larger-than-life reputation of success, philanthropy, and high living. Beautiful mansion, private jets, the finest wines are all part of his scam. And as we've seen before, this was all on the backs of innocent victims. He bilked millions from his so-called clients, leaving some of them destitute.
We're talking about tens of millions of dollars here.
There's a lot of trust with Ian Thau. If you go back, Ian Thau knew a lot of these people from many, many years ago.
Meet Helena and Shirley, two sisters who were enjoying a modest retirement living in their small home. That is until Ian Thau came into their lives and created a financial disaster, all based on fraud.
I've never hated anyone in my life before.
Shirley?
I do hate Ian. At one point, we were up over $1 million. Our money dwindled because of the crash, and that was part of the reason Ian asked us to go to Berkshire. He said, I will have more freedom, I can buy more product.
He went to his clients and he said, you've lost money on mutual funds. I would like to provide you with some alternative.
I said, fine, Ian, if you feel that way, we trust you. You know you're our friend, we'll go with you.
People writing checks to him personally, to his companies. They were meeting him in coffee shops. He had a big Hummer SUV there, doing transaction in his truck. There was no transactions actually being done in his office, which would make sense.
When we were first approached and when we filed the original documents, we had a list of, I believe it was 80 creditors, just over $40 million.
We determined it was two schemes. In the first scheme, he convinced many of the investors to invest with shares of the National Commercial Bank of Jamaica. He lived a very lavish lifestyle, and he stated it was because he invested in a lot of these shares. He had 4 planes. 3 of those were jets that he actually owned or had part ownership in. He had at least 1 helicopter. He had a second he was using as well.
He took clients to a fishing lodge, and these were wealthy clients, and he asked the server for their most expensive scotch, and it's brought out, and turns out to be $10,000 a bottle, and he makes a big deal of opening it up, tasting it, and then pronouncing it unsatisfactory and throwing the bottle over his shoulder and having a smash on the ground.
And we lost just about every cent we had. And he came to us one day and said, I feel so bad that you ladies have lost so much money. He said, I have a lawyer friend in Vancouver whom I myself am dealing with. Developers come to this banker and they borrow short-term money.
This came about towards the end of his scheming days. He was going to actually have them purchase these this short-term construction financing, and it basically was short-term. And for the first time, he actually promised specific rates of return.
So he came to the house again, and he said, "This all has to go through me, like as if I'm the one giving the money to him. It'll be in my name." But he said, "I keep very good records."
The people had to get extremely large lines of credit. Ian Thau was very good at making that a very efficient process for people. And a lot of people had equity in their houses, so they could use that as collateral, for a secure line of credit.
We had a widow who was convinced to take all the proceeds from her husband, the insurance policy from her husband's death, plus mortgaged her home. She lost everything, and she went from a widow with no financial worries at all to working at minimum wage as a sales clerk, renting in a tenement building. We had another individual. Once he got the news, he tried to commit suicide. His marriage broke down, and he's still being treated today for clinical depression.
We were just on the verge of asking him for our money. when all of a sudden the bottom fell out and we started hearing these rumors. We tried to contact Ian. We phoned him, and he would not return our calls.
When they knew something was happening, they actually had Ian Thao come over, and they surreptitiously recorded the conversation with Ian Thao, which was, I thought, was brilliant.
How much is lost in North America each year to invest in fraud? $100 million, $5 billion, $11 billion, or $50 billion? Before the break, we asked, how much is lost in North America each year to investment fraud? Is it $100 million, $5 billion, $11 billion, or $50 billion? The correct answer is C. There are many types of investment fraud. An exact dollar amount is hard to pin down. Some estimates peg investment fraud at over $11 billion per year.
If anyone asks,
So when Ian came in, he sat down, and it's funny, he very often asked us if we were taping him. And no, we don't tape you, you know. But this day we did. It was quite revealing, I think, that I think on it, it sounds like fraud to me, what he said.
there's no reason for that.
The fact is he was still working for Berkshire, and the allegations are that Berkshire should have had more control, or at least more knowledge as to what Ian Thao was involved with, especially when it was very evident he was living this very lavish lifestyle. Berkshire did also step up to the plate. So Berkshire did in fact pay back many of the victims, I don't believe it was 100%, but they did pay back a lot of the victims, a certain percentage of their losses. The investigation started out with 26 victims.
The amount of money that Mr. Thao's victims were defrauded of was, we think, in the range of about $22 million. But at the end of the day, the charges that we ultimately laid related to around $10 million.
Mr. Thao was seen taking or receiving some of his personal assets across the border, across the US border. And again, that's what gave rise to our application to have an arrest warrant issued. Mr. Thao went down to the US and he immediately declared bankruptcy in the US. Were he able to go through the bankruptcy in the US and come out the other end and get a discharge, he would in effect be able to live in the US and not be hassled by the Canadians, because he could argue that his debts have been discharged in the US.
The U.S. Marshals and FBI were also very involved with doing surveillance, pinging cell phones. So they were very involved in this as well. They weren't just sitting back and waiting for the phone call. We had a provisional warrant plus an extradition request approved. He was arrested in Portland, and he waived the extradition, and then he was driven to the border. And at that point, our investigators picked him up at the border and brought him back here. At the end of the day, IMET only proceeded with 21 charges. There was nothing to seize, and the bankruptcy trustee went in and grabbed whatever he could. And at the end of the day, it was really, truly just the equity in the house.
He was banned from the marketplace and fined several millions of dollars. I think it was the record at the time. Basically, he's destitute now. He's bankrupt. And if it does nothing but keep him impoverished for the rest of his life, that's perfectly appropriate in my view, because that's the condition that he left many of his victims.
He didn't get away with what he did. Although they haven't got the money back, he has paid by being given a jail sentence.
A lot of people lost a lot of money, but certainly Helene and Shirley are probably the ones that suffered probably the greatest as far as both, the financial hardship as well as the medical hardship.
I had bypass surgery. Too much stress.
No.
Pressure.
My sister had a heart attack, which I blamed directly on Ian.
Okay.
And he just destroyed our life. We have no money. We hold this house together barely.
Mr. Thao is about to be released. I think today he presents the same risk that he did before. I have no reason to believe that he's not going to go up to someone else, even in the absence of registration, and lie to them and try and take their money.
Which investment fraudster is credited with saying, "I was making over $100 million a year"? Was it Charles Ponzi, Bernard Madoff, Gordon Gekko, or Kenneth Lay? Well, the correct answer is Bernie Madoff. He was quoted making that statement. His Ponzi scheme is estimated to have cost victims over $50 billion.
Total invested funds in the Saxon group of companies was approximately $40 million. Some of the people have put 100% of their saved money into Saxton.
There is no shortage of investment prospects. Equally, there's no shortage of unscrupulous investment advisors. As financial advisors, Robert Izinga's company sought out solid, low-risk investments for their clients. But as we're about to see, even the advisors themselves can be scammed by fraudsters.
I think about some of the clients and the things that we've experienced, right? So it's a difficult thing to talk about, and it's a very difficult thing to take.
Robert was introduced by his boss to an investment opportunity by the Saxton Group.
In our office, we had various investments that we offered, and Saxton became one of them as a suitable investment for conservative type investors.
Saxton Group, there was two main players. The lead on the main part of the company was Mark Allen Izinga, and he had a partner named James Sylvester.
The people that ran Saxton, they were very suave, had all the answers.
Shares that they were offering was primarily based on what was going on in Cuba, that they had this brewery, and their claims were that they owned this company, they were running it, and they also had a label printing business, brand new operation that they invested money in and built the building and so on. They were claiming that they were making 30% returns.
The way it was presented was a fixed dividend account, and it was the operations behind the company was the operations in Cuba and Bahamas. And so the operations were profitable from the information that we were told and were shown, and that was offered to the clients.
Rob approached me if I would be interested in investing my money with him, build up a clientele, and we knew Rob already for a long time, so we trusted him.
Oftentimes you'll hear, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Well, this wasn't necessarily the case for this particular investment. At the time, if we compared it to, let's say, a bank, GIC or something, they were offering about 8.25% or in and around there. So Saxton was offering 10.25%.
They were getting 10.25% on their investment, but it was based on a 30% return on the businesses down in Cuba.
We were kept up to date how things were going down there, and to us it was all very legit.
So I invested my own personal money in excess of $200,000 in the company, and my family's money as well. I had other clients as well that invested in, or I would gear their money towards Saxton.
Now, you want to pull up the other chart?
They made various public presentations. They were very well aware of where the money was going, because they were the ones handling the money. They were involved with the actual sales to the investors, to what the pitch was, and the fact that the pitch was inaccurate. There was the investors were not told the truth about where the funds were going. They weren't told the truth about the guarantees. There were no guarantees.
Things were running okay there. They showed us pictures. But see, it was another end where the money was disappearing, which we were not aware of.
People liked the registered retirement aspect of it. The investors did, that they could invest money in this corporation and get share certificates. It would all be held within a retirement savings plan, and had some kind of guarantees, because they had a bank was sending out the quarterly statements for them, saying, okay, then there's the bank's overseeing what's going on. There's some less risk involved. There's good returns being made, and sure, I'll put my money into that.
When they started to amalgamate the financials, there was a lot of delays.
Those funds were very difficult to trace. Approximately just under $6 million went to the Bahamas. We traced that. And then a large amount of money was spent on leasing vehicles, Porsche, several Mercedes.
We got the first letter that there were problems.
I think one feels very anxious when you get a letter like that. It brings up fear. How could we ever have gotten into this position?
You know, that was kind of a holy crap moment, because it's like, whoa, you know what's going on? There's obviously some problems here, like big problems here.
I remember right away calling Rob, what's going on? And it went from bad to worse.
Rob had the heart-wrenching task of informing all of his clients of their massive financial losses.
For me personally, as an advisor, that was kind of my you know, I looked at that, and you're kind of, your heart falls in your stomach, and you say, this very well may be a scam.
I had worked for 50 years, never was unemployed, hardly ever sick or anything. And then all of a sudden you lose your job. And then you lose your money. On top of that, I felt guilty, because I was the one who talked her into, you know, investing.
You have to be careful then not to blame one another for something that in the first place they probably couldn't help anyway. But it's so easy to do in a moment of frustration or anger to do that.
My parents were receiving a kind of like a quarterly payment. So kind of the first, when everything was frozen, you know, I had to say to them, like, listen, you know, the quarterly payment that you're receiving, we can't receive right now, we have this freeze on. It's a difficult thing to talk about, and it's a very difficult thing to take and experience.
One way to tell if an investment is legitimate is to take a look at the company's website. If the website is professional looking, the investment must be sound. True or false? Well, the answer is false. Fraudsters have been known to create false websites to fool investors. Make sure you check an investment out thoroughly before parting with your hard-earned money. After the Saxton Group assets were seized, investors started having meetings. Lawyers, shareholders, and accountants were trying to see what avenues existed to try to get their millions of dollars back. Upon further research, they discovered that any monies put into Saxton were almost untraceable and almost certainly long gone.
There was a statement that came out from, I think it was KPMG, that had audited the operations, and it showed that the assets were only worth about $5.5 million or something, and they could only account for about $10 million of $40 million.
We found out how many people had invested and what kind of people. Then we learned that lawyers had and doctors had, and I thought, well, if they did, well, you know, and I did too, maybe I shouldn't be too hard on myself in thinking, how dense could you get?
Surely all the money can't be gone. And, you know, we have, you know, monthly statements, we had quarterly statements, we had all these documents that we thought justified or that the investment was real. A lot of sleepless nights, you can't believe it. You look back and you think, one, you feel a huge amount of guilt. So you're looking at it and you're saying, you know, my first concern wasn't really for myself and my family so much as it was for my parents and a lot of the family and friends that had invested in the company.
The police had a difficult time trying to find people to testify because so many of the victims were friends of the financial advisors. And they're the ones that encouraged them to invest in Saxon in the first place. And even after all of that happened, their friends didn't want to turn them in or get them into any further trouble.
A lot of people were nervous about testifying in court. A lot of people were embarrassed. Dealt with a person they trusted, and they didn't want to get that person in trouble. They were both charged in 2003. Unfortunately, Mr. Sylvester died shortly before the preliminary hearings were to start, and Mr. Izinga entered a plea of guilty in November of 2005, before any witnesses were actually called. So Mr. Izinga was sentenced. He received an 8-year prison term, and at that time a $35 million restitution order was made. He appealed those decisions. His sentence of 8 years was not changed. It remained, and the restitution order was amended to $20 million based on the argument that he was unable to pay.
It's not unusual for life to give you detours, so this was one that we had to learn to deal with. Yes, there's the loss of dreams, of well, when we retire, maybe we can do such and such. But after we lost the money, that was not possible anymore.
The one thing that this experience has really taught me, there are some people that truly value the relationship over money. And those are the people that helped me get through it, you know, that really emphasize the fact that they realized that they trusted me and that I didn't violate their trust, and that they understand and realize that I also was a victim. And those people and those relationships really help you get through.